Dive Podcast, straight talk on politics, national security, and America's future. With Robert Johnson and Linda Miller, we cut through the spin, tackle the tough issues, and give you the real story behind today's headlines. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell to stay informed.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a close look at a scenario that could really send economic shockwaves across the globe. What happens if this escalating conflict between Iran and Israel, well, what if it extends for weeks or even months?
Right. It's a serious question.
This situation, it has the potential to trigger global inflation, maybe even recession, impacting pretty much everyone.
And it's happening just as things seem to be, finding their footing a bit after the pandemic and the conflict in Ukraine.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack what we know and give you a clear understanding of the potential ripple effects.
Okay, so June 13th, that seems to be the flashpoint. The situation escalated dramatically then.
What happened exactly?
Well, the Israeli military and Mossad launched aggressive strikes. Targets were military but also civilian across Iran.
And the stated aim?
The stated aim from the Israeli government, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, was essentially to stop Iran's nuclear program. Forcefully.
By targeting facilities?
Yes, destroying nuclear and conventional military sites, and also, reportedly, eliminating Iranian specialists and high-ranking military personnel.
And this happened while diplomatic talks were still ongoing.
That's right. It seems this action was taken without waiting for the outcome of those talks between Iran and the U.S. about a potential nuclear freeze. Iran predictably responded.
With equivalent force, you said?
Equivalent retaliation against Israel, yes.
So what followed was this intense back and forth. Missiles, drones, bombs.
Exactly. Highly destructive attacks. Ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones, other weapons. Flying over the Zagros Mountains, the Golan Heights, it became very kinetic very quickly.
The ultimate outcome, who knows, right? It's incredibly uncertain.
Completely. But one thing seems clear. The longer this goes on, the worse the economic fallout gets. For the region, obviously, but also for the whole world.
Every single day generates costs that eventually, land on us. Global populations will bear these costs.
Sooner or later, yes.
It really feels like we could be standing right on the edge of a new major economic crisis.
The immediate market reaction certainly pointed that way. It was stark.
Tell us about that. What happened right after the initial conflict started?
Well, by Friday afternoon, you saw these significant negative effects globally. The big worry, oil supply disruptions.
So oil prices jumped.
Instantly surged, yeah. And stock markets, they took a hit across the board.
Like the big indices?
Yep. The S&P 500, it dropped 1.1%. The Dow Jones fell 1.8%. And the NASDAQ composite saw a 1.3% decline. And American stocks, their value really hit a low point right after Iran launched its ballistic missiles towards Israel. It wasn't just noise. It was clear market anxiety.
And it wasn't just the overall market, right? Specific companies must have felt it keenly.
Oh, definitely. Companies with big fuel needs, they saw substantial losses almost immediately.
Like airlines, cruise lines.
Exactly. Think about their operating costs. Fuel's huge. Carnival Cruise Line shares, they fell 4.9%.
Wow.
United Airlines dropped 4.4%. Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings was down 5%.
It's amazing how fast those shockwaves hit, isn't it? Even sectors you might not immediately connect feel the squeeze.
Precisely. And then, on flip side,
someone always benefits, unfortunately.
Well, as you'd expect, oil markets surged. American oil, WTI, jumped 7.3% to nearly 73 times a barrel.
And Brent?
Brent crude, the global benchmark, also up 7% to over $74 a barrel.
Okay, 7%. In the grand scheme, maybe that doesn't sound world-ending on its own.
On its own, maybe not. But think about a sustained increase like that. Day after day, if the conflict drags on, that's when the real alarm bells start ringing for the global economy.
It's that fear premium kicking in.
Exactly. It's markets pricing in the uncertainty, anticipating future problems even before they happen. That often fuels the sharpest initial spikes.
So while most markets brace for impact, some industries actually, stand to gain. It's a stark contrast.
It really is. American oil producers, for instance. ExxonMobil saw shares rise 2.2%, ConocoPhillips up 2.4%.
Because higher crude prices mean higher profits for them. Simple as that.
Pretty much. It shows how investors quickly pivot towards what they see as, safer bets or industries that might profit from the situation.
And it wasn't just oil companies, I gather.
No. Defense contractors, manufacturers of weapons and military gear, they also saw a boost.
Like who?
Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, RTX, that's Raytheon Technologies, their shares increased by over 3%.
Suggests investors are anticipating more demand for defense products.
That's the logical conclusion, yes. During geopolitical tension, that often happens.
What about other safe havens? Gold.
Gold, too. Its value rose 1.4%. Investors flock to gold during uncertainty. It's a classic move.
And this is all happening while U.S. inflation is, what, around 2%?
Currently, yes. But there's always that potential for it to creep up, especially perhaps if tariffs imposed by U.S. President Trump start to bite more broadly. Their full effects haven't really been felt yet.
Right. Let's shift focus a bit. These jumps in oil markets. It seems inevitable they'll lead to higher prices for consumers everywhere.
Absolutely inevitable. It's a direct line. We feel it at the pump. We feel it at the grocery store.
Because transportation costs go up for everything.
Yeah, exactly. And Iran is a major player here. 7th largest oil producer globally.
Even with sanctions.
Even with Western sanctions restricting its exports, yes. So if a wider regional war really kicks off,
The Iranian oil deliveries could slow down.
could slow dramatically.
Yeah.
And that would push crude prices up even further. Our analysis suggests oil could easily top $100 a barrel.
Within days or weeks.
If the conflict persists, yes. Within days or weeks seems plausible.
And a $100 oil price. That spells trouble globally.
Big trouble.
Okay.
Increased transport costs, fueling inflation across the board. Serious economic difficulty for many countries. Consumers everywhere would notice those price hikes.
Which countries are particularly vulnerable to disruptions in Iranian oil?
Well, Asian nations rely heavily on it. China, India, Malaysia, the UAE, Singapore, though maybe more discreetly, Turkey. It's a really complex global energy web. And interestingly, Venezuela, which is also under U.S. sanctions.
They import Iranian oil.
Significant volumes, yes. As condensate, which is a lighter type of crude, they mix it with their own heavier crude for export. Shows you the intricate, sometimes hidden links in global energy.
And the instability doesn't stop with Iran, does it? If the Persian Gulf is unstable.
Right. It could easily impact other huge exporters right there. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq. That just adds fuel to the fire of global energy instability.
A real domino effect.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It could lead to a massive reduction, maybe even a halt in supplies to the global market.
Which means?
Sharp, sustained rises in energy prices, commodity prices. The consequences hit almost every national economy, especially those dependent on oil imports. It highlights a fundamental vulnerability.
And then there's the really big one, the Strait of Hormuz.
Ah, yes. The catastrophic scenario. If Iran decides to close the strait
Explain why that's so critical. It connects the Persian Gulf
to the Oman Gulf and then out to the Indian Ocean, it's a vital shipping lane.
If Iran closes it, oil prices wouldn't just rise.
They would explode dramatically.
How much oil actually goes through there?
It's huge. Around 20% of the world's entire oil supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. Iranian oil, Saudi, Iraqi, massive volumes.
Has Iran ever actually closed it?
Officially closed it, no. But they have restricted passage before.
When was that?
Back in the 1980s, during the Iran-Iraq War. They didn't blockade it entirely, but they used missiles, sabotage, hindered tankers from Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia.
And what happened to oil prices then?
They surged, more than 150% increase.
Okay, so if something similar happened now, in 2025, what are we talking?
Our projections are stark. Global oil prices could skyrocket. 200%, 300%, and maybe even 400% increases aren't out of the question.
Governments, oil companies,
Yeah.
they'd have to find other routes.
Alternative routes, yes.
Yeah.
Which are much more expensive, much longer. It's not just an inconvenience, it massively inflates costs.
Which automatically pushes up fuel prices.
And pretty much all other goods, too. Everything gets more expensive to transport.
And investors, the exchanges, how would they react?
Extremely negatively. You'd see worsening instability in financial markets, a cascading effect through the global economy.
Countries that rely heavily on imports, China, Japan, South Korea, India, the EU, they'd be scrambling.
Absolutely. Compelled to take drastic measures to secure energy reserves. And, you can't rule out
Military intervention.
military intervention to forcibly reopen the strait, which of course just ramps up geopolitical tensions even further. The human cost escalates too.
And as if all that wasn't complex enough, there's another factor, the Yemeni Houthis.
Right, an important factor. They've explicitly said they intend to target ships in the Red Sea and Suez Canal.
Specifically Western ships.
American, British, French, other Western vessels, yes.
They've been attacking ships for years, haven't they?
Mostly container ships, yes, using drones and missiles. But these attacks could definitely intensify now, given the wider regional picture.
And And the threat alone is damaging.
Hugely damaging. It increases risks for all international maritime traffic, for global trade. It could lead to serious supply chain disruptions.
Affecting all sorts of industries.
Think about it. The Suez Canal is a critical artery. If ships have to reroute around Africa, that adds weeks and massive costs to shipping everything from electronics to clothes.
So ultimately, it seems the duration is absolutely critical here.
That's the key variable. A truly dangerous scenario unfolds if this conflict drags on for weeks or months.
The initial shock is one thing, but weeks or months, that's different.
That's when short-term volatility could harden into real, entrenched inflation. If it stretches into months, yeah, we are talking genuine global recession risk, potential commodity shortages.
Widespread inflation, recession, actual shortages of goods on shelves.
That's the worry. And we might see a particularly noticeable deficit in high-tech goods. Microchips, computers, electronics. They could become much harder to get and much more expensive.
But there's a potential positive, if you can call it that, if it's short.
Well, the flip side is, if the conflict is limited, contained to just a few days, authoritative economists suggest these widespread catastrophic consequences probably wouldn't happen.
It really highlights that fine line, doesn't it, between a contained incident and a global shock.
It does. And you can bet bankers, stockbrokers, dealers everywhere are glued to the news, trying to stay ahead.
And unfortunately, for some
speculators, yes, war presents an opportunity. Inflating prices, profiting from misfortune. It's a grim reality.
We can only hope it concludes as swiftly as possible to limit the suffering, limit the economic damage.
Absolutely.
So while the headlines focus on the immediate fighting, perhaps the true global impact will be measured differently. In our grocery bills, at the gas pump, in the resilience of supply chains we normally don't even think about. It really begs the question, just how prepared is the global economy for a sustained shock in its most vital energy corridor? And what long-term changes could emerge from all this uncertainty?
Big questions indeed.
Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We are here to make things clear. New episodes every day.